Two, one.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. We're going to be talking about what took place on the internet yesterday that really got a lot of people talking. A guy named Tim Pool, who's a very, very popular alternative news type of, I'll say new media. We'll get into what exactly his show is like. He is very big on the internet. He had as guests Kanye West, Milo Yiannopoulos, and Nick Fuentes, all as the guests on his show. And about 20 minutes in, Kanye got up and stormed out. So that's kind of the hot talk of the town. And we have a lot to get into. We're here with a historian, a former prosecutor. Some of the remarks that Milo has made makes me wonder if, prosecutor James might need to do some digging and find out if there's some statute of limitations still open for prosecution, but I'll leave the legalese to him. Please welcome James Valliant.
Hi, how you doing?
Pretty good, other than the world being a pretty depressing place in some respects. The whole thing is like, when something gives me like a physical cringing response, like my body responds with a cringe, that's not a happy time. That's not a good moment. So when I saw Tim Pool tweet out a picture from a private jet of Kanye, Milo, and Nick Fuentes all sitting together. So it's already been kind of shocking enough that Kanye is associating himself with alt-right, bottom of the barrel scum, in addition to the scummy things that Kanye himself has been saying. And now that Tim Pool, who is kind of like a mediator between the bottom of the barrel of the internet and between them and sort of more normal people, that's an Overton window moment when Tim Pool tweets out a picture of them and then has them on his show. Now, a lot of people would say Tim Pool has crossed that line a long time ago with who he affiliates with, but this is nonetheless a big moment that clearly expands the Overton window of who people consider to be acceptable or worth talking to, who people will take seriously as, conservatives or as just voices to be reckoned with. So it was that just the announcement.
Let me defend Tim for just a second. Sure. I'm certainly not exactly in Tim's camp, but he wanted to recreate and get the background on last week's dinner with Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Those same three people apparently had dinner at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump last week. Donald Trump, of course, got into all kinds of trouble because he hosted them. He normalized these racists, and that's the only way to put it. I mean, for those who don't know who Nick Fuentes is, he is a ghastly anti-Semite. He questions whether the Holocaust happened or not. He is advocating sort of a medieval Catholic approach to things. He opposes immigration on cultural, ethnic grounds, and he's a pretty vile, as you say, bottom of the barrel, sort of thoughtless. This 24-year-old punk, in my view, sort of thoughtless caricature. And I sometimes think that these right-wing nuts like Fuentes are the caricature that comes out when you don't have a philosophy. When you're not thinking through ideas on your own, you become sort of exactly what your opponent thinks you are. And he's becoming a caricature of sort of the left-wing attack on the right. He's sort of adopted for himself. And that is, of course, what happens when you're not philosophical, when you're not careful about your ideas. He is, a collectivist mystic, just like they're collectivist mystics, only more aggressively so. He'll defend the Taliban. Now, Donald Trump said, I didn't know who Nick Fuentes was when I had him for dinner last week, but he then did not denounce it. He did not denounce the guy. He didn't, try to separate himself any more than that. Nothing anti-Semitic was said. Kanye wanted to talk business, said Trump, and so we talked business. He wanted to talk politics. I told him not to run for president, and that's the other thing. Last week, Kanye announced he's running for president, and it looks like Nick Fuentes and Milo Yiannopoulos have joined the Yay 24 campaign. And so Tim, I think, who says he's not a journalist, he says he's an activist, had them on to get the news. How did this meeting come about? And apparently Trump did not know Nick Fuentes beforehand, but surely if you're Donald Trump and you're having dinner, you need to do a little homework on who you're having over for dinner. And even if somehow someone snuck through the gate at the front door at Mar-a-Lago, afterwards you denounce this kind of anti-Semitic creep like Fuentes.
Yeah, no question. It's very telling, and we went over this yesterday on the show. The way that people like Candace Owens and Trump, they're distancing of themselves from Nick Fuentes is just say, "Oh, I didn't, I don't even know who he is, I don't know him. It's like, okay, what if what if he was like, I don't know, if he blew up a building and then killed a child? Would you just say, I don't know the guy, or would you say, oh God, I had no idea I was in the presence of? So this guy's like an actual Nazi. I mean, what he advocates for is basically just textbook Nazism. I don't know what else you would categorize him or what he would. I don't know if he would even take issue with that. He would probably sneer at that and laugh. That's
he's
even
a thoughtless. I think Ayn Rand in her last speech had a great term for these kind of people: the God, family, tradition swamp. And this guy is the ultimate mouthpiece for the God, family, tradition swamp. Tradition, and I mean medieval tradition, is what he harkens back to. He wants to see a Christian, and he means a Catholic Christian country. He wants Catholic Supreme Court, a Catholic media, a Catholic cultural revolution. He believes that the Republican Party has been taken over by Jews and homosexuals. That is an exact quote from him.
Yeah. So what's your defense of Tim Pool, who I'm not, my criticism of Pool is nuanced. I have a lot, there's a number of angles here, but you started by saying, well, let me defend Tim Pool a little bit.
Having them on to find out what was going on last week, to get news about that, because, and Tim said it well during the podcast last night. He said, I'll have these people on because giving them a microphone is the best way to have them marginalize themselves. And they did exactly that by storming off. They had the opportunity. Tim pushed back. Tim was simply saying, who do you mean by they? When you say they did all this to you, Ye, because Ye is saying, how he was the victim of this huge conspiracy and how media is controlled by the Jews and how Hollywood is controlled by the Jews. And so when he just uses the pronoun they were out to get him, Tim pushes back. Who do you mean by they? So Tim was about to confront and was in the middle of the mildest confrontation, but he was going to confront him on it. So I'll give Tim the credit for at least having them on for the purposes of news. If they're going to make asses of themselves, let them make asses of themselves. Let them have a microphone so that everyone can see what jerks they are. And they took him up on the invitation, it seemed. They got up and walked out and made a bigger headline. I think they were using Tim just as they're using Trump to get publicity for Ye's presidential campaign.
I appreciate, like many people, I appreciate that Tim and his co-host pushed back on the, Jew bashing, but I'm not sure I agree with the decision to bring these three guests on in the first place, especially because it wasn't very clear that he was bringing them on to challenge them on this controversial issue. Tim was mostly looking to talk about the headlines of the day, which he does with every guest. And that's kind of the problem with Tim Pool. Here's his format. His format is he has various guests on to talk about the headlines of the day, not necessarily what this guest is known for discussing and not what they're an expert on, but just the topic of the day. And there's nothing wrong with that format. Many shows do that, like Bill Maher does that. He has a panel of people, and regardless of what their background is, they talk about what's happening in the news that week. But if it's a controversial guest, if it's, Steve Bannon or Milo Yiannopoulos, that's the one-on-one segment. That's where Bill Maher brings them on for the purpose of finding out exactly who they are and confronting them if necessary. But with Tim Pool, it's always the same. He brings various people on just to ask them about the topics of the day. So the problem with that is, and I think this is a criticism made against Tim Pool that I think is valid, he's definitely done a lot to normalize a lot of creeps of the right. He's had various people, many guests who are personal friends with the Nick Fuenteses of the world, various people who are themselves, including Milo Yiannopoulos just a couple of weeks ago. So I'll ask anyone who didn't watch this, the episode of Timcast from yesterday, watch it the first 20 minutes and just pay attention to what Milo says. Just Milo. He's reading his own script from 2016, where he used to say, "Oh, people are finally waking up to the left and what the left has been doing to us." He's reading that script, but replacing left with Jews. Now he's basically gone full, anti-Jew, and he's encouraging Kanye with all of that. That's what Milo was saying. And keep in mind, this person, Milo, who is saying this now, the people are waking up, that they've been unable to criticize the Jews for so long, and they're finally waking up to it. And Kanye is a important figure in this. This Milo was a regular guest on Timcast 2 weeks ago, not to talk about Jews or anything, but to just talk about the news, the midterm elections. So you got to ask yourself, what happens when all these creeps go on Timcast, they talk about various topics in the headlines, and they get a bunch of new fans, and then their fans are learning about, how Jews run the media. Tim Pool never has the opportunity nor the desire to confront them on these things.
I think I have to agree with you there, insofar as he's simply giving them a platform and normalizing them and wanting to have a friendly chat about, the politics of the day. I think that's wrong, insofar as just as I would denounce Trump for, having a cordial dinner with Nick Fuentes and saying everything was wonderful. So I think you'd have to do that in spades with Tim. If that's all Tim Pool is doing, then, in fact, you're right to this extent. Even Mr. Poole said about it after they stormed off, I was just wanting to discuss the politics of the day with him. Of course, I knew this would come up, but I didn't know he would bring it up. And it was Ye who brought it up, the whole anti-Semitic controversy, and he wouldn't let go. And he felt his truth wasn't being heard, I guess, and so he stormed off. If the policy of the Timcast is to just normalize these people and just have them on for a friendly chat, I would oppose it. The way it came out, I think, was fortunate in that sense for Tim, because he did push back on that. He obviously disagrees with the anti-Semitic position these guys are taking. To that extent, I guess I'll defend the Timcast. And it did provide a moment where everyone could see what ignorant, and in fact, their inability to articulate, the getting up and walking away says all you need to know. Ye cannot defend his position. He can't give you a thoughtful answer. He's not a thoughtful guy. He's not a philosophical guy. What else can you say? I think that to the extent that Tim normalizes creeps like that, it's wrong. But this was a marvelous opportunity. We could see what stupid, hateful people these really are.
I think Tim was planning on bringing up the issue to Kanye maybe an hour in or at some point into the episode. So he was not going to completely cut past it. But I really do think it normalizes the rhetoric that Kanye's been spewing, as well as his affiliation with people like Nick Fuentes. It normalizes it. It makes it seem reasonable. It encourages other podcasters or just various people to feature these people and to bring them on to basically spread their garbage. So it's just, I'm not a big fan of Tim Pool in that respect. I think his decision to have these guys on his show, I think, tells us why alternative news is it's not going to, it doesn't deserve all the respect that legacy media gets. And I know legacy media has a lot of baggage and a lot of corruption. But at the end of the day, there is a science to journalism. There is such a thing as journalistic ethics. When you need to interview Charles Manson, you're not his buddy. You're not flying in with him and then bringing him into your home and just chatting about the news for the first hour and then asking him, so why'd you carve a swastika on your head, Charles? There is centuries of thought have gone into these things, and when anyone with a YouTube account can just become the biggest name in news, you start to see at a certain point why they're never going to have the same reputation as the real thing. Again, the real thing, legacy media has tons of problems that gave rise to a lot of this that we're seeing.
Well, see, that's it. Of course, people get frustrated with the mainstream, as it's called, mainstream media for various and often valid reasons. And you can say the same about MSNBC and CNN, and you can say the same about Fox. They obviously have a position that they're taking. They're obviously, objectivity in journalism has declined, as you point out. But that's why I brought up the idea that Tim Pool does not call himself a journalist. He says, I'm an activist. And insofar as he is not a journalist by his own definition, then just interviewing these people for the news, which is basically his justification for having them on last night, goes away. Because if you are just a journalist, you should be free to interview Nazis, communists, whoever, for the purposes of gathering news. What happened last week at Mar-a-Lago, for example, if quad journalist, he may have been doing something valid there. Tell me about what happened at that dinner with Donald Trump. Tell me about that discussion. Did Trump know you guys? That kind of thing. Just as you would, a journalist would interview, as you say, a convicted murderer or something, Charles Manson. But he's not. He's an activist and not a journalist by his own definition. So having these people on regularly is, I think, a sanction of their evil. Yeah.
And to me, it just kind of like raises, oh, by the way, Razi behind the scenes reminds us, today's Giving Tuesday. Why don't you give us, we got a few super chats in already. If anyone who wants to super chat, it is Giving Tuesday after all. It would be bad karma not to. Please support the network. But yeah, I mean, for a long time, I've been saying, and it's true, I've been saying it because it's true, obviously. The right has moved so far in the spooky direction, in the like crazy conspiracy nut direction, and in that including the historical revisionist, anti-Semite, Holocaust denying direction. And it's not that all mainstream conservatives agree with that stuff, but the amount of mainstream conservatives today that are basically have breathed the same air as Nick Fuentes on a number of occasions, that behind the scenes have hung around him and others just like him. I mean, just look at how few people are like even calling out. Let's put it this way. So after Kanye stormed off and took his entourage with him, or they left with him, Tim Pool started reading off the names of Republican politicians that have denounced Kanye or denounced Trump for his dinner with the notorious guests. Okay, that's politicians, but how many pundits, how many commentators, like how many influencers have done that versus the ones that are kind of, like I've said, reading the room? Do I want to push away? Do I want to push away the alt-right that far? Do I want to just kind of say I don't really know them that well? The whole thing just kind of creeps me out.
Well, you have to ask yourself why Trump even had him over last week if he wasn't still trying to, benefit from their following, who still wasn't courting their minions. Well, what purpose would Trump have had to have them over except for his own political ends? And that's what. Yeah. I mean, well,
we did learn,
right?
well, we did learn, and I guess this was the purpose. The said purpose of having these guests on Timcast is that we did learn that Kanye and Trump had dinner planned for a few months, and it got postponed because of whatever. And then Kanye went out and said, he's going DEFCON 3 on the Jews, and Trump kept the dinner appointment with Kanye, which is a controversial decision. But then Trump was not expecting, Milo and Nick Fuentes, and it's not necessarily a fact that he even knew who they are. He probably didn't know who
he may
Fuentes
not have known
is.
who Fuentes was, and he may not have known Fuentes. He probably should have. As a person of such, high profile, everyone is living in a glass box. I mean, he has to be ultra aware of that. But surely he knew about the controversy surrounding Ye recently. He could not have missed that. Yeah. And, if, Ye, bring whatever friends you want over, is kind of the attitude. And I guess Milo was the one who hooked them all up together. He should have done a little more homework, it seems to me. And then afterwards, simply saying, I didn't know who Fuentes was is completely inadequate. Really, he had to denounce them. But it's clear from that weak response that he was, and he is still courting and using that constituency. He's interested in their following. Otherwise, Trump wouldn't have spoken as he did or had them over. And that's pretty vile in my view. Now,
Pretty
on
much,
the other
yeah,
hand,
go
you're
ahead,
right.
go ahead.
There were a bunch of Republican politicians who denounced Trump just simply for having dinner with these people. And, that's good. I like that. And people who used to be supporters of Trump questioned, obviously folks like Pence, who've long since, burnt the bridge with Trump, were denouncing him. But you've got a wide range of Republicans now, even some who had been friendly to Trump up to this moment, denouncing that meeting. And I think that's a good sign. They do need to be marginalized. And it's a good thing to the extent that they are marginalizing him. I think this has hurt Trump. I think that on the other side, Trump, yes, is using them to court their constituency, but there's no question in my mind that Fuentes and Ye and Milo were using Trump, and they were going to use it, really milk it by going on the Timcast last night. I don't know if it was planned for them to storm out, because really there was nothing that Tim said that was so, challenging or offensive. You're stupid, or I disagree. He didn't even say, who do you mean by they, is basically all Tim asked, and Kanye gets up and storms away. You're denying my truth. No, it may have been planned. I don't know, but they certainly are using Tim. They were certainly using the meeting with Trump to launch their own independent campaign for president, it seems. I think that it could hurt the Republicans if they have an independent third-party candidacy out there, because they are denouncing the Republicans, and all the mainstream Republicans do seem to be lining up to denounce them. So could it be a hygienic thing to purge these people? Yeah, it could, if it's going to be a hygienic purging of these people and this attitude from the Republican Party. I don't know how principled the Republicans are going to be on this, of course. They rarely are principled about anything. But to the extent that they're denouncing Ye and Fuentes, it's a good thing.
It is good. But now, the more that people like Trump and the alt-right are marginalized, the more they're removed from social media or boycotted in any way, the more people say, oh, you see, I told you that there's, this censorship going on, like people choosing who to associate with is an act of censorship. And unfortunately, the conservative media, like such as the Daily Wire and many others, and Steven Crowder, they've sort of built their brand around mocking anyone who is clutching pearls about anything. So it's now at a point where, like, anytime you're upset at somebody, people jump in and go, oh, you're censoring them. Oh, you're a leftist. Oh, you're a snowflake. Are you triggered? But like, yeah, sometimes someone actually is worth boycotting, worthy of boycotting. but it's been drowned out. Now, of course, we can do a full episode about how the leftists brought this upon themselves. I largely focus on how conservatives brought Trump upon themselves. They brought the state of things upon themselves. We can definitely talk plenty about how the left brought it all upon themselves with their antics. But nonetheless, we are now at a point where the hardcore conservative position is to not be offended by Holocaust deniers because, well, that's just the left telling you to be offended. It's absolutely ridiculous. Right. So Trump at some point will just be, he's already been scrubbed from most of social media and the internet. At a certain point, people like him and Kanye might be boycotted farther and further. And Nick Fuentes and others like them, like they're going to be boycotted further and further, and like people, and that we might even get to a point where people like Tim Pool are also kind of scrubbed from the internet for like giving them a platform and for making affiliating with them in some way. And it won't always be fair per se, but I will say it was avoidable, and people are going to insist like, oh, this is proof that the conspiracy was always true, that the forces that be are stopping us from having an honest conversation, and they don't want you to challenge the system. It's very silly and childish. At a certain point, I just find myself, especially in the last 12 hours, just kind of shrugging and saying, let the internet figure this out for themselves. Like let smart intellectuals just deal with one another away from all of this noise. And that's where I think the future is.
Yes. Because you have a conversation with any of these people, it's not going to be an intellectual one. They're not going to be talking about ideas. They're not going to be talking about their policies for solving the problems of the world in America. No. They're talking. It's obviously a positioning of politics for power. excuse the alliteration. Both sides, I think, are engaged in politics, and neither side has a philosophy. You can't, rub two ideas together in that at that dinner in Mar-a-Lago. It seems to me these people are emotionalist, mystic traditionalists who are making emotionalist, mystic, collectivist appeals for power. And it is, like I said earlier, it's sort of a caricature of the criticism, right? The left lays out a criticism and you embrace it and you go for it. Yes, if that's what you think I am, then I am. But Milo, for example, famous homosexual. And so if you were to ask them, well, look, we have Fuentes, some Hispanic there, Ye, who's African-American, we've got Milo, who's gay. In their heads, well, see, we're not bigots. We can't be bigots at all. Astonishingly, they can be bigots just as much as the left can be bigots, as they, discriminate, happy to have laws and a legal situation that discriminates against Asians getting into Harvard University or something. It's what we have are racism emerging on both sides and then getting stronger and stronger in reaction to one another. So it's almost as though this tribalism is intensifying both sides. Mm-hmm. Is the best way of putting it. And it's nothing to do really with the mind at all. It's an emotional thing. These people are letting their guts sort of direct them with things. They're not thinking. And in this sense, they become sort of like determined caroms on a board, buffeting off the sides or whatever. And they become, as I say, a caricature of themselves, because they're molding themselves from the criticism of the other side. And it seems like both sides are doing that to some extent. Horrifying.
Now, I will mention, Milo in the last few years has announced that he's no longer gay. He's now an anti-gay Christian of some kind. I think Catholic has always been.
He had converted to Catholicism a while ago. But now he's officially anti-gay. Anti-gay,
converted to straightness, and actually some messages have leaked supposedly by Milo from just a few months ago or a year ago, saying that he believes Kanye is gay and that he wishes to kill Kanye, to execute him for this sin of being gay. So
I missed that. Good Lord.
So Milo is he's what they call a grifter, like back during the early days of this whole Trump phenomenon, when it was still kind of cool to be pro-capitalist, but they were moving away from it. I read Milo's book, his first one. I think he had more than one, but his book where he was talking about growing up. He said, I used to read Atlas Shrugged and fantasize that I was Dagny Taggart. Can you imagine a time when a conservative would even, try to cater to that crowd, right? To cater to people who like Atlas Shrugged. Remember that? That brings back very old memories.
To some extent, I identified with Dagny Taggart, but I'm not sure in the same way that Milo did.
Right. But he's just such an He's such an opportunistic grifter, yeah. So like first he was pandering to the gamers, right? When like all these edgy internet people back when all that was the thing, there was a market for that. Then he was completely run out of town by the conservative establishment, and now we see he's like gone full alt-right, anti-Jewish, anti-establishment, but considering the establishment to be a Jewish-run, homosexual-run thing. Like, so he's fully embraced that crowd. Like, just wherever he can pander to something, to someone, he's there. And it really makes you go ahead.
It's when Trump says The Fountainhead is his favorite book, or when Milo says I was into Atlas Shrugged at one point, or all these other people who say that they loved or had a phase or whatever with Ayn Rand, they too are trying to simply use her popularity. They are trying to suck up as many of the softer-headed people who like Ayn Rand into their camp. It calls on us to be more philosophical and more aggressive in our response, frankly. How dare they use Ayn Rand? How dare they use Ayn Rand? It's disgusting. Absolutely vile and disgusting, and the opposite of everything that these people are.
The more time passes now, the more I kind of look at the conservative movement with a fresh set of eyes, the more I'm embarrassed by the fact that Fox News and Glenn Beck and all these people used to, parade Ayn Rand in some way. I think it was always embarrassing, and it's a big reason that sensible people avoided Rand sadly.
Well, I used to, when I grew up in the 1970s, as a teenager, and I got to know, Ayn Rand and get involved in ideas and politics and stuff. I used to denounce the conservatives at the National Review for how they treated Ayn Rand, and they totally mischaracterized her, attacked her. It was vile and vicious. And yet now I'm at a position of saying, I long for those days. I long for the days when conservatives honestly said, Ayn Rand is our opposite.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think
because so much today, so many of these right-wing kooks, to put a nice phrase on it, are trying to glom on to some extent Ayn Rand's popularity. I wish they wouldn't. I wish they wouldn't touch it. But of course, Ayn Rand's popularity with the young and the thoughtful, the fact that Ayn Rand has a large constituency of fans, is what they want to take advantage of.
I think your things have come full circle, and your wish has come true. But for the Daily Wire's announcement regarding the Atlas Shrugged series, which I think was a very tone deaf decision by them. I don't think their audience wants Atlas Shrugged, and I don't think they know what. I don't think that's where the conservatives are at. So I think things have come full circle. We are back at the National Review days of them distancing themselves from Rand, but like they are worse now. They're like National Review minus any inclusion of like respect for the Constitution or individualism in any way. So it's a nasty scene. But yeah, like, and with regards to Milo, I think looking back, he's an enormous embarrassment when you see it at the way that conservatives embraced him for any amount of time. The farther Milo falls from grace, you just really have to cringe at the fact that he was going to be like a speaker at CPAC right before he was canceled, before the infamous audio leaks of him talking about, sex between minors and adults.
Yeah.
That he was largely embraced, and that's an embarrassment. So even the people who are speaking out now, they're saying, yeah, Trump shouldn't meet with Kanye, or that he shouldn't meet with Nick Fuentes. They're mostly trying to forget that Milo ever happened, because he reminds them, and he reminds everyone of the truth, that the conservative movement is a grifter's paradise. It is a place where fake theatrical people can show up, speak to the lowest common denominators, and just kind of tell them, I'm just like you. And it riles them up, and it makes them feel like this is their one chance to finally get revenge at a world that rejects them and outcasts them for their not being part of the intellectual world. I mean, my opinion of the conservative world and the movement, to me, I've come to disdain them for being just shameless. And the left is horrific, but like the left has some kind of intellectual backdrop that can be engaged with and challenged in that respect. Conservatives, and increasingly with time, are showing to just be loudmouths who drown out debate. Everything that the leftists were doing, leftists on college campuses were shouting down speakers. That's basically all you get with the right. That's all you get with them, is just they just make fun of you for your opinion. They tell you like, oh, you're normie takes. That's, you're blue pilled and I'm red pilled. It's like childish. So maybe I'm overgeneralizing. I'm just a little bit worked up at the moment. So that's not the best time to podcast.
But you're absolutely right. They don't argue. They don't discuss ideas. They're not trying to figure things out. No, these people aren't intellectuals at all. They are emotionalists. They are personal, demonizers. It's all a matter of humor to them. Nothing is serious. You're either emotionally on their side or you're not emotionally on your side. You're one of us or you're one of them. It's a kind of tribalism, absolutely. And it's a totally thoughtless, as I say, God, family, tradition, swamp kind of thing. These people are not intellectuals. And whatever semi-intellectual status the right wing was trying to develop in the 20th century is certainly, as you point out, gone by the wayside. You don't have an intellectual right. You never really had much of an intellectual right before, but you really don't anymore at all.
Let's read some super chats. Dave Goodman with $2 says Nick Fuentes should not. I'm not even going to read this. He would like to see something violent happen. We don't where he's being hyperbolic and using metaphors. We want peace and civility and an intellectual battle to take place.
No words, however offensive, can justify the initiation of physical force.
And I don't think Dave wants and is encouraging anyone to do it. He's just saying he wishes. We wish that bad people die of natural causes. And as soon as all the bad people die of natural causes, capitalism unleashes cures to all disease. Jonathan Honig with $9.99 says, please note that everything Fuentes, Kanye, and these other SOBs say is supposed in the name of Christ. Yeah, the invocation of Jesus and of Christianity by Kanye and by Fuentes and by Milo is noteworthy, and it's important. And it's hard to argue against. It's hard to argue against people who cling to faith and are using faith as their argument and appealing to other people's faith. So to the extent people take religion seriously, they are susceptible to all types of horrible ideas that come in the name of these.
Let's see here, Jonathan. Kanye's from Chicago. Right? Fuentes, I learned, is from Chicago. I don't know about you Chicagoans out there. Jonathan. No. Thank you very much for the super chat. You know, it is that time of year, and a lot of Americans, because of tax purposes, like to give to charity in December. But it's also, giving time, and it's a time for people to, as they're looking through their year calendar, and we're coming to the end of the year, it is a good time to consider our long-term values. It is Giving Tuesday. And if you think that what we're doing here is a value, the stuff we do with Rucka and Jonathan Honig, Mark, everyone, please do consider becoming a subscriber and a member of Ayn Rand Center UK. This would be a wonderful time of the year to do it. And if you do it now, it will be like a Christmas present for us. We'll get it by Christmas time. So please do consider becoming a member of Ayn Rand Center UK.
Now, speaking of Chicago reminds me of when Mitt Romney, the sort of anti-Trump candidate, right? Like, there's plenty wrong with Romney, but then, like, in the modern era, he's seen as like the guy standing up to Trump. That's how far the Overton window has moved, I guess. Now, Romney, I remember when he was running for president, in a rare moment of like, I don't know what the adjective is or the noun, or like when he was showing his teeth. In a rare moment of that, Romney, he said, like, he like says to the audience, he says, Mr. Obama, take your voter fraud and your tactics of corruption and take them back to Chicago. That was like his thing. And people loved that, of course. Oh, yeah, get him. So this whole like voter fraud allegation, this ongoing allegation that, oh, every election, we don't like Democrats stole it. This has been going on for a long time. Even the anti-Trump Mark Levin used to hammer this narrative over and over and over again. And looking back, I mean, it's like, just, I don't know, if you think there's voter fraud or whatever, I don't know, like, isn't there a better way to deal with it than to just keep announcing it's happening before the proof is in? That's kind of how I look at it. And it kind of led us to the current climate where Republicans just they're sore losers to the point where, like, they insist every election is stolen from them.
Right. Right. It's now common practice for both sides to denounce the legitimacy of the election. I mean, Hillary Clinton said that the election was stolen from her, although she didn't have followers that stormed the Capitol on January 6th.
And to be fair, and she conceded that night. She considered election night.
That's the thing. That's the big difference between her and Trump, for example. She actually conceded, formally conceded. She said it was, in effect, illegitimate and stolen from me, and she continued to say that. But that's a big difference than saying, I'm going to fight this to the end, even after the Electoral College has elected a new president.
Christopher with 149 Canadian, thank you for that. Phoeben with $10 says, I understand what you're saying about journalism, but in the context of podcasting today, most podcasters only invite on people that they like or admire in some way. Yeah, I mean, I understand Tim Pool wants to get to the bottom of what happened at dinner in Mar-a-Lago, but like, something to me is very off about, flying in on the private jet with the three of them and bringing them into his studio. And I think it hurts his credibility in my eyes. It hurts. I mean, there's a lot wrong with it that we discussed earlier in the episode.
I think you made a really good point. I think that at the end of the day, I think it was a wrong decision on the part of Tim. Perhaps I was a little precipitate in defending him. But if it was the context of pure journalism and he was just trying to get the news of last week out, that I wouldn't denounce the journalist simply for doing that. Let me put it that way. But you're right. He has sanctioned these people, and apparently, and I'm not as familiar with the context of Tim as you are, for example, having Milo on before, and then having this big publicity with these guys before on the plane, that I think is a kind of sanctioning that I myself could not do. I just couldn't hang with these guys in a friendly way,
Yeah, it's a weird time we live in when like the line between normal people and the worst people has just been like harder and harder to even draw. And we all kind of deal with these questions every day of like who to even go near if we're involved in this whole world. These are tough decisions.
Thing, I'll often, I'll discuss history, ancient history on various podcasts, and I really don't know what the politics or the religious beliefs of some of these people are. It's just a narrow technical subject that we're discussing. If it's like that, then that's one thing. But if what you're talking about is their political views, if you're platforming them precisely to have a discussion about these people's political views, and you're taking advantage of their reputation for your ratings and stuff with all this publicity, that's a sanctioning, in my view.
So when on Thanksgiving Day or evening, when Kanye first posted his running for president videos, and one of them heavily featured Nick Fuentes. So like this was really making the whole thing trend, and people were becoming aware of who Fuentes is, or reminded of who he is and his affiliation with Kanye and Trump now. During all of this chaos, Kanye retweeted one of Tim Pool's employees who posted like a video of Kanye taking a picture with some people at the Timcast news office headquarters, something like that. He's taking pictures with they're big fans, like, and Tim Pool's employee girl is like tweeting this out, saying like, oh, I really love, like in another video she posted of Kanye, she's saying, I legit love this video. And in the video, Kanye is saying, we need to put God first in this country. God first, then America. And then he like leans in and goes, and then Israel. It's creepy. And again, this is why these internet news people, whatever they are, they're never going to be the establishment. Like they're never going to be taken seriously. And this is, again, there's so much wrong with the establishment, but you should not trade in something remotely stable and reputable for the type of people that would gloat in such a way and would celebrate this type of lunacy.
I'm not a big fan of the CPAC. I'm not a big fan of Turning Point. I'm not a big fan of the standard mainstream conservative at all. But this alternative, that's what Fuentes wants. He wants an alternative to standard conservatism. He wants he wants to outflank them on the right. He wants something better. He denounced Trump and said we need a better candidate than Trump. So what does he want? He wants something further out than Trump, something more explicitly nationalist than Trump, something more explicitly fascist than Trump. So the idea of even supporting this guy, I mean, give me a standard conservative any day over that. For gosh sakes. Make conservatives look good.
Yeah, I mean, my point was more about like alternative news versus like legacy establishment. But also, like, I think if the closer you get to Turning Point USA and you actually meet some of the people operating there, it's like these are election deniers. These are anti-vax extreme people. Like these are people who hang out with Nick Fuentes and other alt-right creeps, and they know they can't publicly show that fact, but they would be happy to bring him and others like him into the fold if it were politically expedient. And and there's and as Trump would say, and I assume there's good people at Turning Point too. But I'm saying that spend some time at Turning Point and speak to people off record, and you kind of see what they're about. The populists have taken over the conservative movement, but I will say this: since the midterm elections, between the midterms and the time that Elon Musk brought Trump back to Twitter, in that 2-week window, whatever it was, conservatives began to realize like maybe Trump and everything that came of Trump was not a good idea. And then Trump gets his Twitter back and they're like, yeah, the culture war is on again. All right. So I don't think they're going to win a lot of elections at a national level, maybe local elections. You can almost any crazy idea can prevail in a small region. But at a federal level, I don't expect Republicans to win unless it's by default anytime soon, because they have a lot of baggage now, and it's going to become more and more apparent. The more the Tim Pools of the world have the Nick Fuenteses of the world and the Kanye Wests of the world on their podcast, and there's a friendly tone about it, You can argue with me, people. You can say I'm unreasonable. I'm the one stifling debate and trying to censor. I'm just saying, look, don't kill the messenger. I'm telling you, normal people out there, they're not looking to have President Fuentes or anyone who goes near Fuentes.
No, I think you're right about that. There's no question you're right about that. They're trying, and they would be happy to use the constituency of the other person and absorb that constituency, for their own purposes. Absolutely. But you're right. That 2-week window was very interesting. The election really did reveal that Trump has done Republican brand no favors, whatever. In fact, in our last discussion that you and I had, right as the eve of the election, we were making that same point, how Trump had really hurt the Republican brand, and the election showed that. It really did. You saw how the Republican governor of Georgia did so well, and how DeSantis down in Florida did so well, and other non-Trump Republicans did pretty well. But he was the kiss of death for Oz in Pennsylvania, for example, and other places. Trump is pretty much becoming more and more radioactive, it seems to me, to the Republicans, and they would be well served to dump Trump at this point. No question.
And abortion is a big one. And conservatives really did a victory lap when Roe v. Wade was overturned. And I don't think voters are going to forget that anytime soon. So look, I'm not excited to see Democrats win, but I do think if the pursuit of happiness is on the minds of people, then abortion is important to them. And I'm happy to say in that respect, the pursuit of happiness still matters to people. That means they're not handing this country over to populist nationalists that are telling them to sacrifice, and they're not going to give up abortion rights. I just wish they would understand that real capitalism is in order for their pursuit of happiness. But that's the battle.
I think the election might have been different had the Dobbs decision not come out as it did. I think that abortion was the other main reason why the Republicans did much worse than they expected on election day. And they need to think that through. They really do, the Republicans. It's been the kiss of death for them. In fact, their unprincipled ways, they saw, how many elections now has Trump hurt for the Republicans, the last 3 election cycles? And it was the only really, happy moment there was, here's this outsider, this non-politician, and he's come in and he's going to change Washington. He's going to drain the swamp. Wasn't that the phrase they used? He did, of course, no such thing. But you see, that non-traditional politician did liberate all of these loose cannon voices on the right. It sure did. The worst thing that Republicans could do would be to continue with Trump and to continue down this path, or to normalize the people like Fuentes and Milo or Ye. That would be bad. But I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing a lot of standard Republicans criticizing Trump, much less Ye and Milo. So that's a good sign, at least to that extent.
But it's so pragmatist the way I see it. It's like they finally realized it only took them 3 elections, 2018, 2020, and 2022, to realize Trump is not a winning guy. Now they're say, okay, no more Trump for now. That is, no more Trump until he's the nominee. No more Trump. DeSantis is the guy now. No, I'm afraid it's not that simple, folks. You're stuck with him now. You broke it. You bought it. And also, it's not based on any principle. They're still going to be anti-abortion. They're still going to go with all types of kooks, and they're not really denouncing the conspiratorial elements. Like I said, they've completely worn this brand of the left is responsible for everything wrong. There's a conspiracy in place, and everyone's out to get you. They keep on pushing on the audience. And now they need to live with the fact that there's a new game in town, or not a very new game, the oldest game, but a rising in prominence game that is voiced by Kanye West, that is really blaming the people in charge, if you know what I mean. And now you're stuck with this guy too. You're stuck with Kanye. You're stuck with Milo. You're stuck with Trump. We're running out of time. Marcelina with 11.99 euros. Thank you for that. Johnny with 19.99 American says Giving Tuesday. Thank you for that. Remember, everybody, it is Giving Tuesday, so hurry up and super chat. Marilyn with $10. Thank you for that. Roland with 249 euros says yay, Y-A-Y, for Giving Tuesday. Yay, Y-E for president? X, no. Thank you for that. Kim with $4.99 American says thanks, thank you. And then Robert with $5 says, meanwhile, tomorrow, Dr. Peikoff's answers on official objectivism. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. All right. Look forward to that tomorrow.
We have a great Peikoff Wednesday scheduled for tomorrow. We do.
And Justin with $4.99 says, people on the left met with Louis Farrakhan, but no pushback from mainstream media. Yes. I mean, it's very upsetting. This has been going on for a long time. I wouldn't say there's no pushback. Definitely, Farrakhan is not a household polite society name. You would not want to bring him a lot of places. You would not want to affiliate with him if you were many public figures. However, yes, there is a double standard and long has been. And it's especially if you happen to be an African-American celebrity, you can hang out with Louis Farrakhan and affiliate with all of his Jew bashing, and you won't suffer the consequences in most cases. But yeah, generally speaking, the left has their own set of rules, and it was never fair. But do we want to see the right become the Farrakhan of Catholicism?
But that's exactly the point that I was trying to make earlier. You see, the left, we know, has harbored anti-Semites for a long time. What was Jesse Jackson's Hymietown remark about New York, Farrakhan, you name it. There's been all kinds of anti-Semitism. And I don't want to single out African Americans, but many prominent African American political leaders on the left have said anti-Semitic things for decades. But what is the response on the right? Do the same, or let us get away with the same over here? No, obviously not. You're absolutely correct there. It's no justification for the right to say, well, you guys have been doing it. No one do it.
I mean,
look,
how
about no one do it?
People say Trump is half the country, right? Like when Biden said, oh, MAGA Republicans are terrible. And I think he was right about that. But like people said, oh, you're insulting half the country. And I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. I think many people that are much more than half the country did not want Trump, as we're going to keep learning. But let's say the right, quote unquote, is half the country. Do we want half the country to be conspiracy quackpots? Do we want half the country to think it's on them to keep a gun pointed at their front door every day because, the left is coming to take their kids away? Like you gotta have respect for the intellect, and you gotta be civil, and you gotta not be hyperbolic. There's a time to be sober, folks. So that's increasingly what I'm understanding. That's why I find myself increasingly gaining respect for people like Sam Harris and Lex Fridman and people who are like, they're just generally calm and thoughtful, and they take you on through the process, even if I disagree with them where they conclude. Like that's to me like where there's some hope is with calm, sober intellectuals.
Least, as you were saying yesterday with your conversation with Mark, at least that Sam Harris, I mean, for all his determinism and his left-wing politics, at least he is a calm, deliberate, he's trying to present an intellectual argument. And that, of course, is the only path here. And unless you take the ideas seriously, unless you take ideas seriously in general, you're not really working for anything but hell in the future by necessity. If it's your emotions and your gang versus their emotions and that gang, everyone's going to lose. Everyone's going to lose. The only way out, no matter what your starting position is here, is intellectual persuasion. And to do that, you got to know your own ideas. You've got to check your own premises, and you've got to be careful about what you yourself believe, accept, and endorse. And that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing gang warfare between different tribes who identify as, in effect, different tribes. It crosses, what's so fascinating though, it does cross ethnic lines, and ethnic lines are basically what both sides are now digging their heels in on. As though the facts on the ground, there are all kinds of African Americans and Hispanics and Jews on both sides, it seems to me. So it seems that we've sort of transcended that as the issue, and yet that's the issue on which everyone's digging in their heels. No, we're the victim group. No, we're the victim group. And that's it. They're using this emotionalism to say we're being victimized in some conspiratorial way. Let's face it, all this left-wing, intersectionalism, it's a giant conspiracy theory of its own. In fact, it's a giant racist conspiracy theory of its own. But to have the right respond in kind is, of course, only to get worse, not to have a good response to it. Quite the opposite.
Yes, the left is rampant with anti-Semitism, racism, conspiracy theories, and all types of horrific things. But people, if you point out that the right is increasingly imitating that, people tell you, stop talking smack about the right, stop criticizing Republicans, stop criticizing conservatives. They don't want you to criticize the right at all. Another thing I'll point out, and I hate to say this, I hate to make the left look good, but maybe deep down I'm on the left. At least the comment section feels I am. If you want to learn about how the left arrived at their current state, you take a 5-month course with Professor Sotirakopoulos, where you learn about structuralism, about Malcolm X, about post-structuralism, about you learn about postmodernism to understand how they arrived here. If you want to know what the right currently believes, you just say Trump tweeted something. That's pretty much the extent of maybe I'm.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. We were having this discussion too about Ayn Rand's own comment about the left and the right. She said she was at one time she was envious of the left because they had at least some kind of intellectual argumentation to them, some kind of intellectualism to them. And when she was speaking around 1960, she said, "I no longer have that." As far as she was concerned, they had already declined so far on the left that they'd chucked in any ideas platform, a thoughtful platform. And I think that things have gotten only worse since her time. But then again, the right has only gotten worse since her time.
We can dedicate a full episode to this, but I think Rand made that point during the hippie days when the left were just completely incoherent. But I think today, at this point, we're at a point where the hippies have taken over the right. You have these libertarians and all these incoherent emotionalists. They basically become the force of the reactionary right, and if anything, the left has simmered down a bit. They've cooled down. A lot of former hippies, they became more like your basic run of the mill, no nonsense, left leaning, sort of liberal centric. Like things have happened even since Rand's time. So I think there's a lot to get into. We truly are running out of time though, so let me get back to the super chats. Bonnie with $1.99, thank you for that. Megan with $5 says, "Happy Trading Tuesday." Thank you. That's better than Giving Tuesday.
Yeah, trade. I like that.
And then, for speaking of trade, free trade with 100 of the Swedish krones. I don't know what's 100 Swedes. What's that worth in dollars? I wonder. But thank you. I like the high number, regardless of what it is worth in regular money. Robert with $5 says, "It's an insult to half the country to say they wholeheartedly support the candidate they voted for. Many, both sides, voted for the lesser of two evils." Yeah, that seems to be the way, the American way, which is why, other than a couple of exceptions, midterm elections are always in the favor of the challenging party rather than the incumbent sitting party, because that's how people are always frustrated. I want to endorse
very much what Robert said there. I do not simply think that all the people who voted for Trump believe everything Trump said, and all the people who voted for Biden believes everything that Biden supports. I think there was a large negative vote on both sides, and it's very, very unfair to equate the whole ideology of either man to their voters.
By the way, 100 Swedish krones is worth almost $10, I'm told. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Coming up at 7 p.m. UK time, which is in 2 minutes, it's the Fountainhead Book Club with Shoshana Milgram for ARCUK members. The session will also be live streamed for YouTube members. Link in the chat. All right. Thank you all for watching. I understand these are hot button issues. So many of you are upset at some of the opinions expressed. Look, all we can do is be honest and tell you, here's what I think today, and here's my conclusion currently. I understand you can always explore these nuanced issues from another angle. We're dealing with human beings. People are complex. But we appreciate you watching. Thank you, James. Always a pleasure.
Always. Thank you.
My pleasure. And we'll be back tomorrow for the Daily Objective. And goodbye.